Before we dive into this unbelievable HOA drama turned criminal downfall, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss insane real-life stories like this one, because trust me, this one starts with arrogance, entitlement, and a so-called HOA queen, and ends with handcuffs, betrayal, and a son who thought his mother's neighborhood power made him untouchable, until reality dragged him straight into a jail cell. It all began in a seemingly perfect suburban neighborhood, the kind of cul-de-sac where lawns were manicured like golf courses, fences gleamed with fresh white paint, and the local homeowners association, or HOA, ruled with an iron fist that was both hated and feared, and at the top of that HOA sat a woman the neighbors had nicknamed Karen, though her real name was Martha, but her reputation as a self-appointed enforcer of every rule and regulation had made the title stick, because Martha thrived on confrontation, on writing violation notices, on calling people out for leaving their trash bins out 2 minutes past pickup time, and on hosting HOA meetings where she would pound the table like a judge and deliver fines as if she were handing down sentences in a courtroom. And she loved every second of it, believing that the HOA was her empire, the neighborhood her domain, and the residents her subjects. But what no one expected was that her own son, a 22-year-old college dropout named Tyler, would become the downfall of that little empire, because Tyler, unlike his mother, had no discipline, no structure, and no respect for the rules she enforced so ruthlessly. Instead, he was entitled, reckless, and constantly looking for shortcuts to money and power, fueled by his mother's constant bragging that, "Around here, what I say goes," a phrase he took far too literally, believing her authority extended beyond HOA rules into the actual law itself. Tyler had been trouble since his teenage years, always skating by on his mother's ability to smooth things over, whether it was convincing the school principal not to expel him after he got caught vandalizing lockers, or threatening neighbors into silence when their kids accused Tyler of stealing bikes, and Martha had always swooped in like a hawk, shielding him from consequences, telling herself that he was just misunderstood, that he would grow out of it, but instead Tyler grew into a cocky young man who believed he was untouchable, and that arrogance came to a head one night when, fueled by boredom and a dangerous sense of invincibility, he decided to break into one of the neighborhood homes, not out of need, but out of ego, because he wanted to prove to his friends that he could do whatever he wanted, in the very community his mother ruled. It started with him bragging in a late-night group chat, boasting that he could walk into any house in the subdivision and take what he wanted without anyone daring to call the police, because everyone was terrified of his mother's HOA power, and his friends, half drunk and half amused, dared him to prove it, and Tyler, never one to back down from a chance to show off, chose a target: the Petersons' home, a family who had been vocal critics of his mother's strict HOA policies, once even threatening to sue after Martha fined them for having Christmas lights up 2 days past the HOA deadline. So Tyler saw it as the perfect revenge, a way to teach them respect, and he waited until the neighborhood was quiet, slipping through the Petersons' side gate, jimmying open a window, and stepping inside like he owned the place. But what he didn't expect was that the Petersons had recently installed a new security system with motion-activated cameras and alarms, and within seconds of Tyler rifling through their living room drawers, the house erupted with noise, lights flashing, sirens wailing, and his friends, who had been watching from the street, scattered like cockroaches, leaving Tyler panicked and alone inside the house he had so confidently claimed he could rob without consequence. In desperation, Tyler bolted out the back door, only to find himself face to face with a neighbor who had come outside after hearing the alarm, and in a moment of sheer arrogance, Tyler blurted out, "It doesn't matter, my mom runs the HOA, you can't do anything to me," before sprinting away into the night. But those words, overheard by more than one witness, would soon become the quote that sealed his fate, because the Petersons didn't just call the HOA, they called the actual police, and when officers arrived, they reviewed the security footage, identified Tyler almost instantly, and drove straight to Martha's house, where they found him hiding in the garage, sweaty, breathless, and still clutching a handful of stolen jewelry. Martha, horrified but still clinging to her illusion of control, tried to intervene, marching out in her HOA blazer and barking at the officers that this was a neighborhood matter, and that she, as president of the HOA, would handle it internally, demanding they release her son immediately. But the officers, barely able to contain their disbelief, informed her that the HOA had no authority in criminal law, and that her son was under arrest for burglary, trespassing, and theft, and when she tried to physically block them from taking him away, one of the officers warned her she could be arrested for obstruction, a threat that finally silenced her, though not before neighbors gathered outside to watch the spectacle of the woman who had lorded over them for years, now powerless as her son was shoved into the back of a police cruiser, his cocky smirk fading into panic as reality hit that his mother's title meant nothing in the face of the law. But the twists didn't stop there, because once Tyler was booked into county jail, investigators dug deeper into his recent activities, uncovering a pattern of petty thefts, break-ins, and even credit card fraud that he had been running for months, using stolen mail and packages from neighbors as his starting point. And worse, some of the evidence suggested that Martha had looked the other way, ignoring complaints and dismissing accusations against her son in order to protect him, which raised questions of whether she had indirectly enabled his crimes. And as the case unfolded, the neighborhood, once united in resentment against Martha, now buzzed with gossip and vindication, finally watching her empire collapse. The story made local headlines, plastered with the ironic quote, "My mom runs HOA," alongside Tyler's mugshot, and the internet latched onto it, turning it into a viral meme about entitlement, with captions mocking the idea that an HOA could override criminal law. And while Martha tried desperately to salvage her reputation, calling emergency HOA meetings and insisting she was still fit to lead, the board voted her out in a landslide, citing not only the embarrassment she had brought but also her abuse of power in covering up her son's behavior, leaving her humiliated, ostracized, and stripped of the authority she had once wielded like a crown. Meanwhile, Tyler's legal troubles mounted, as prosecutors pushed for a harsh sentence to make an example out of him, arguing that his arrogance and repeated offenses showed no remorse, and though his lawyer begged for leniency, claiming he was simply a misguided young man influenced by a domineering mother, the jury didn't buy it, and when the judge finally handed down the verdict, guilty on multiple counts, with a sentence that would put him behind bars for several years, the irony wasn't lost on anyone that the boy who once bragged about his mother's control over a neighborhood now found himself powerless in the rigid hierarchy of a jail cell, where no one cared who his mom was, and the only rules that mattered were the ones enforced by prison guards. And in that stark reality, stripped of entitlement, Tyler learned the hard way that power built on fear and arrogance crumbles the moment it collides with real accountability, leaving behind nothing but broken reputations, shattered illusions, and a cautionary tale that neighbors would whisper about for years, reminding each other that no matter how high someone builds their petty empire, it only takes one reckless act, and one smug declaration that, "My mom runs HOA," to bring it all crashing down. And that is why, when you hear stories of people who think they are untouchable, you should always remember how quickly the script can flip, how the enforcers can become the disgraced, and how the son of the self-proclaimed HOA queen now spends his nights not in a suburban mansion, but in a jail cell where the only thing he runs is out of excuses.